He's also a Nomad Cruiser, but we've never been on a cruise ship together. I've been on Nomad Cruise 6, 7 and 10, and he was on number 9. The first time we met was at a Nomad Cruise meetup in Canggu, Bali, and we clicked instantly. We were at this big event with 50 Nomad Cruisers, and we it was just you and me at the bar talking for 3 hours or something like that. I don't know exactly what happened. It was kind of like a bromance.
Basically, we started talking. It was one of those, well, what do you do? What's your podcast about? What are you talking about? And you started to tell kind of what you do and what you talk about. And I eventually said, I'm just going to pull you down to the bar here. If you like good stories, I've got one for you.
I lost count on how many glasses of wine we had.
I don't know. My glass never got empty. It just continued to...
I think that was it. The magic glasses of Canggu Bali. And boy, did he have a story for me. Or several, in fact. So if you're here for a good story, you're in the right place. And here's a little bit of what you're gonna hear today. What's it like being in the US military in Kuwait? And what's it like being stationed in Guantanamo Bay? We hear so many stories about Guantanamo Bay. What's it like down there?
Well, it's awesome. So
there might be some Taliban that disagree. Yeah. Working as a super gig for the FBI, posing as a kid to lure out the creeps.
You know, when you hear the whole story, it's an immense amount of satisfaction.
About him thinking of becoming an agent?
Yeah, because it's awesome. And you're working all around him, yeah. And you hear about the training. Yeah, you definitely think about all that and where it could go from there.
Getting a job while being drunk in a karaoke bar?
Do you have a job for me? Is exactly what I said. In the bar, hammered drunk.
And getting rocket attacked in Afghanistan.
Holy crap, I'm on this plane with all this fuel. I gotta get off this thing now. And now I'm just one of everybody else running off the airfield. You don't really think, you just sort of run.
Before turning nomadic.
That felt good.
All this and much more in this episode. My name is Palabo.
This is the Radio Vagabond Podcast.
This episode is brought to you in part by Hotels25.com. It's a website that helps you find the best prices on hotels and guest houses and hostels around the world. Hotels25.com. Okay, now it's time for you to meet my new friend, Wade.
So my name is Wade Sellers. Grew up in Pennsylvania in the U.S. and then went down to Florida right after high school. That was base of operations for the most part. I've been a nomad, I guess you'd call it, for just over a year. I flew the coop last New Year's and been in Bali and around Europe. I hopped on the Nomad Cruise, which is why we have so many mutual friends and bumped into each other there. I'm an iPhone app developer, and I teach high school teachers how to build iPhone apps, and then I give them curriculum, and they teach high school coding courses to students. And then before that, I had quite an interesting life and run with the military. Then I was in the FBI for a little while, and then
let's dive into that. You're in your early 30s now.
So I'm 34. Yeah. In my lower 20s, I was a nursing major at a community college in Florida, and didn't know.
Hold up. Nursing major.
Yeah, I was gonna become a nurse. Basically, when I moved from Pennsylvania to Florida, I needed an excuse. So I had an uncle down in Florida who was a nurse anesthetist, and I went down to visit Florida because of work. And then I called my parents, because I fell in love with Florida, and I called my parents and said, I'm going to move down here in a year and go to nursing school, and Brian's down here and he's a nurse, and this should all work out. And basically they said, sounds like you have a plan, why don't you run with it? And I was like, I got away with it. But now that was like, okay, I'm allowed to leave now.
Yeah.
And so I started in the nursing program at St. Petersburg College down there and was rolling through it. And about the time when the real hard work was coming, I was like, I couldn't hold this fakeness anymore. I was like, I don't actually want to do this. So I stopped going to nursing school. Didn't know what to do.
You just stopped attending class?
It turned into part-time, and then it turned into one class a semester while I was working restaurant jobs, and eventually it was just, that was the end of it.
So you didn't start by going to the principal's office and say, I'm quitting school?
No, I just kind of weaseled my way down to nothing. I kept going as long as I could get financial aid, and then I'd take the rest of the money, and that was basically my savings account that I would burn while not going to school and racking up debt. And
But what was it that attracted you to that kind of lifestyle, and what was it that made you think you took the wrong choice?
honestly, really what it was is I grew up in a small town, and I knew in middle school that I was getting the heck out of this small town in Pennsylvania. This was my escape route. This was what I could get proud parents and approval to go.
So
and
a parent pleaser.
100% parent pleaser, yeah. And then once I didn't want to do it, I didn't know what to do.
They wanted you to be a doctor, really, but then the second best.
Honestly, they probably just wanted me to do anything I was excited for, and I faked excitement for that enough that they believed it, I think. But it was when I didn't know what to do that eventually my dad said, why don't you join the military? And that was kind of, he was in the military, we're a few generations deep in it, and he joined because he didn't know what he was going to do either. He was baling hay for a living and didn't know what, and he joined the military to get his stuff figured out. So I think he kind of saw that I was sort of lost like him, and he's like, it worked for me. Yeah. Maybe it'll work for you.
And it did. Wade joined the military, and it was just right for him at the time.
The military was a logical route, and honestly, for that there was a 9-year career with all of this. That was all a lot of logic, a lot of me understanding that I do like following procedures, and I like making my way up somewhere, and that whole career field with the military and then beyond was all, you could see where you could go as long as you pushed hard, and that felt good. But that was all dictated by logic, and this is what I'm supposed to do, and make your dad proud, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da, all those deeper feelings of insecurity or just wanting to feel accomplished from, your parents and such. And honestly, it was like, I don't know how far you want to go into it, but, there was like a catalyst moment in my life where it basically was an explosion moment that kind of shifted things.
We'll get to that. Stay tuned. First, a word from our sponsor. You're listening to the Radio Vagabond podcast. Before we continue, I'd like to remind you that I would be so thrilled if you shared it on Facebook or Twitter. And now, back to the show. And we're back. So, Wade, you joined the military. Where did you go, and what was it like?
So I joined the Coast Guard. I was an operations specialist, which is basically a glorified radioman. I would manage a radio crew, and we would do watchstanding and pass information from the boats and helicopters and such up to the officers, and then pass the information back down. I deployed to Kuwait. I was stationed in Kuwait at a naval base over there and securing a port.
Is there still a big U.S. military in Kuwait?
Oh yeah, once we get somewhere, we never leave. So yes, yeah. Once we get there, we never leave. Yeah, that was a pretty chill job. There's not really a war in Kuwait. Kuwait owns the waterway, and everybody plays nice in Kuwait because they can't get stuff in and out of their own countries. So Kuwait's kind of a safe zone-ish. With that being said, we manned a port, so like our boats were taking stuff back from the war. So a big Navy boat would show up, we would secure the port, make sure everything's safe, they'd fill it up with stuff, take it back home. That was kind of what was going on there. Pretty simple, pretty logistics style kind of mission, but it was my first time, like my first deployment. Basically voluntold and then kind of volunteered for the second one, and it just got me started.
What was your job there?
So I'd be at the end of a pier with a radio, and we had boats out there with big guns that made sure everything was cool, and I would talk to them and pass information from officers saying, keep an eye out for this, or this was spotted last night, and then they might say, we see something, do we need to investigate? And I'd say, okay, hold on. I would ask an officer, hey, they see something, do you want to, intervene? And then yes or no, and stuff like that. So kind of the conduit of communication between the top echelon and then the people that are out on the boats that are actually doing the securing.
I've never been to the military. We had the kind of a lottery, and I picked a number that was too high, so they didn't need me. So, but I also hear from people who's been in the military that you become part of a family. You're a really nice community. What was that? Did you get a lot of friends in Kuwait?
Yeah, that's a huge part about it. So you deploy, you're in your unit. We were 117 people in our unit, and then we linked up with a Navy unit that had a couple hundred in it. We were there for 7 months. You work 7 days a week with the same crew. Yeah, you definitely turn into a big family. You work out together, you eat together, you're sleeping in the same type of barracks. your own scheduled shifts. So yeah, it does become a super deep family kind of oriented thing. And you're kind of also in the suck together, right? It's hot in the desert. You have a rough job. You're wearing all this gear. Everything's heavy. There's plenty to complain about. So you do it together, and you kind of build that band of brothers because you're all kind of doing something difficult together. Yeah.
So what happened after Kuwait?
After Kuwait, I was flying back home to leave the deployment, and a buddy asked me. He said, "Hey, would you go again if they offered it to you?" And I said, "I don't think I'd go to Kuwait, but I'd really like to go see Guantanamo Bay. I'd go to Cuba if they'd offer it." And sure enough, we show up in Virginia to like sign our paperwork back in, like we're done with our deployment. And a lieutenant comes out and says, "Hey, we haven't put this on the solicitation board yet, but we're looking for 17 volunteers. You'll go down to New Orleans for 4 months and link up with a group down there. And then you'll go over to Guantanamo Bay for 10 months. And we're looking for volunteers. Basically, if you want to go, I can sign you up right now in the front of the line." And my buddy Jose looks over, he's like, "Ah?" And I go, "Are you kidding me?" So I called my dad, while I was there. I was like, "Hey, Pops, what do you think about this?" And he said, "Well, do you want to do it?" I was like, "I kind of don't want to go again, but I don't know if I'll ever have another shot to go." And he's like, "Go for it." So I signed the papers that day and basically went home for 2 weeks and then went to New Orleans for 4 months. And then I went down to Guantanamo Bay for 10 months for my next deployment.
We hear so many stories about Guantanamo Bay. What's it like down there?
Well, it's awesome. So
there might be some Taliban that disagree.
Yeah. For a very small select few that are there against their will, it probably is not fun. No, when it comes to deployments, it's called the station vacation because it is a town. So it's an island. The town supports the prison side of the island, which is kind of on its own side. That's not so fun in games over there. That's quite serious. But there's an entire town that supports the fact that that thing exists. Mm-hmm. So, what my job was is, again, sat in a communications room. We had boats and helicopters out that secured the bay, entry into the bay. And we just made sure everything was safe and sound, right? We'd pass up information. We'd have some search and rescue calls sometimes when weather would get bad. People would be sailing, stuff like that. But there's a McDonald's. There's a gym. There's AstroTurf football fields. There's a beautiful track, and everything's brand new. There's bars and restaurants. I rented a boat on my 26th birthday, and we went wakeboarding in Guantanamo's Bay. So from a deployment standpoint, from when you go to Kuwait and you go to Cuba, it was awesome from that standpoint. Yeah.
I was kind of expecting when I asked, what is it like? You would say, "You can't handle the truth."
Yeah. There's only a small amount of people that are actually in the scary, tough, this is a jail situation on Guantanamo Bay. Most people are support and family roles for it, and I never got close to anything as serious. We did have some serious stuff happen, like on our side, but not nearly when you think of Guantanamo Bay, I didn't experience that Guantanamo Bay. Yeah.
Were you able to move around in Cuba? Could you go to Havana and stuff like that?
No, unfortunately. So there was what's called a water gate that was right there, and it was kind of a bridge that you cross. And once you cross that bridge, you would be in Cuba. No, we weren't even allowed to get close to it. So never actually went to Cuba. We had a Cuban restaurant, and there were Cubans that ran the Cuban restaurant on base, but that's about as much Cuba as I got.
So Guantanamo Bay doesn't count as a visit to Cuba?
No.
It's tricky.
So I do have the BIN app, right? That colors in the world. I haven't put it on, but I also I can't. No, it doesn't count. It can't count because it's like mini America. Like we had a McDonald's. I don't even think real Cuba.
And you have Wi-Fi.
Yeah, we had Wi-Fi all the time. Yeah, cushy. I mean, I had a small kind of trailer with one roommate. We weren't even in like big bunks. We had air conditioning. Honestly, it's a pretty legit base, when you break it down. We had a movie theater that was outdoor, kind of like an old drive-in movie theater. Uh-huh. You just walk down and watch it. Like the new movies came out, and 2 weeks later they were in Cuba. So, and this is a rumor. I don't know if this is true, but the word on the street is that even the facilities inside the jail, like recess area and such, even for the inmates, is like AstroTurf and stuff too. Apparently it's actually not as crummy rough as people think, which I would believe because we've only owned that thing for like 40 years or something and we'll never give it back, I guess.
But you didn't see any prisoners and stuff like that?
No. That's kind of all behind the door. There's Marines on base. Those guys do the serious real work. We make sure that they can do their work safely by, like the Navy is the police on base. We were the port security, things like that. The Marines are doing the behind the closed doors political type stuff of it.
And for people listening to this thinking, are we going to hear about what it's like being a nomad? Don't worry, we'll get to that.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
Life is short, and there is so much to explore. I won't let a second go to waste. Yeah, time goes fast. I better step it up now. Take some chances, cut some ropes. Ooh, ain't gonna wait much longer. There will be no sleep tonight. I'll chase my dreams while I'm still young and single. Nothing's gonna stop me, no. I have to run, 'cause life is now.
While I was in Cuba, I found an internship with the FBI, and I applied for it while I was still deployed. I came home after that, after the Cuba deployment, and I interviewed, and I got in. I got accepted. There was 4 out of 1,000 applicants. 4 of us got accepted into this internship down in Tampa, Florida. So I was a cyber intern. I was in kind of 2 different offices. We would investigate cybercrime that was happening. So someone outside of the country would come and like break into Microsoft servers. That, since it's across country lines, would be like an FBI thing.
But at that point in your life, were you totally nerdy into working behind a computer screen?
I've always been a nerd. Even in middle school, I used to stay after school and play games on the old Power MacBooks and stuff like that. So I've always been a geek. This was kind of peak geekness at this point. Yeah, because we're talking cybercrime, and then the office next door were the guys that, pose as adolescent kids and then let the creeps come and find them online, and they would bust them, and there's a lot of digital kind of side to that goes into it.
You told me something about that when we were chatting the other day, and can you tell me a little bit more about what you did with the creepy guys?
I mean, it's just weird. So when you get into human trafficking and crimes against children and things like that, it's kind of wild. There's just this underbelly that's kind of always around you that you never really see that's happening. So, if you've ever seen like the show like Bait Car, where they take a nice car, put it in a rough neighborhood, and kind of wait till it gets stolen to bust the car thieves. Mm-hmm. This is basically what you're doing. You're just doing it with a human instead. So you pose as a kid, teenager, someone young, impressionable, kind of in a typical situation where that kid might be online, maybe in a chat room or maybe on a Facebook group or somewhere, and you just kind of you conduct yourself in a way that invites people to communicate with you. And
I guess that requires a lot of psychology as well, and
sure.
And you were basically pretending to be a young boy or a young girl, and do you write in a different way? Do you say something different?
Yes, you into all of this stuff, how to put yourself into a position that welcomes the communication to go to a place where that it's kind of like the bait car situation. You're kind of walking people into a door and opening a door, or at least unlocking it, and then they basically self-incriminate themselves and put them into.
So you were the cheese in the trap.
Yes. A lot of times, with some of these things even just go down to even like prostitution and pimp kind of stings and stuff as well. A lot of times, the role is someone else is making the arrest. You don't want to mix the two together, because one person is the personality. You don't want that voice or that person to be, kind of like if you were a spy, then you wouldn't want the spy to be the one in court saying he did it, because now everyone knows that I know. Everyone knows who I am, such like that, things like that.
Sometimes you were present when they were brought in, and,
Sure.
and he didn't know that he'd been talking to you,
Sure.
and you were just looking there and saying, yeah, I did this. Was that a good satisfaction?
Well, when you hear the whole story, it's an immense amount of satisfaction, because you can think about, well, what if ... Where does it go from there? I've had a lot of, even in the military and such, we've had a lot of training on what to look out for. Have you ever heard of, like, if you see something on a plane that looks a little suspicious, someone that doesn't seem, then you should say something, because the crew is prepared to set up something, because you might be seeing someone being trafficked, right there on the plane, stuff like that. So there's a lot of training that goes into these sort of things. And yeah, you definitely think about like where that stuff goes. If you weren't doing this job, how many people are still getting harmed? And then the wild part is when the numbers on the other side of it, just kind of how still small the dent you're making in is when it comes to the global population and how much this type of stuff's happening. It's kind of like if you're trying to, what do they say? It's like the serpent's head. You cut one off and eight show up kind of thing. It's sort of the same sort of aspect there. Yeah, it's a tricky spot. Yeah. It's kind of a weird job. You're proud, but you're also disgusted, and you have to like take it out of conversation and remember to like clock out at the end of the day, which is sometimes tricky.
Why did you stop there?
Honestly, I stopped there because I just had a new opportunity. I had really, all of this has been building up to, I didn't know what to do. I joined the military. I learned that a security clearance would get me far in and out of the military. I had a security clearance with the Coast Guard. That increased when I got to the FBI to about as high as it gets right before the White House type security clearances. And then I know what I could do in the private sector with that security clearance. There's a ton of jobs and contracts out there that just literally require someone to have that piece of paper and that type of security clearance to even be able to apply for the job.
Did you think of becoming an agent?
Yeah, because it's awesome, and you're working all around them. Yeah, and you hear about the training. Yeah, you definitely think about all that and where it could go from there. There was a turnoff to it, though. It seems like when you become an agent, you're also signing up for at least 20 years. If you want a retirement on the other side of it, and that seems to be the goal of any agent, they never seem to make movements as much into consulting roles or things like that. Agents seem to stay agents is kind of what the vibe was. And to me, that was a turnoff because I get stir crazy quick. And I have a hard time imagining anything I'd want to do for 20 years. And seeing those guys, you could tell that some of them were 16 in and have been in for the last 5, knowing that they have to get to 20. You know what I mean? It just sort of seems like they're not really doing what they want to do, but they're also good at it. It's kind of a weird spot to be. And that's in the military as well. 20 years, you get your paycheck, right? You get to, so you sign up for 6 and 2, right? 6 active, 2 inactive. So you get to 6. And then you usually go in for another 4. Now you're at 10. And then there's the opportunity to sign up for 1 year or 2 year or 3 or whatever you want to do. But you got to 10. You're halfway. And then you start thinking, I'm halfway. You kind of forget about how long that amount of time was. And you're 10 away from a paycheck. Do I do it? And you can see a lot of people make that decision based on, family factors, how they see themselves retiring. But 10 years is a lot of your life. And that just scares me. Yeah. The idea of a paycheck at the end of 20 years isn't enough for me to say yes to 20 years. Personally.
When we come back...
This is kind of where it starts to get weird.
Yeah. Wade tells us a story about a night that changed his life. He got drunk with a total stranger in a karaoke bar, and this guy started speaking in code about his secret job.
I know what he's saying. Should I tell him I know what he's saying?
Well, did he? And what happened next? That's in a minute when our program continues. Stay with us. I've received an email that I'd like to share with you. Hello, Palle. I'm listening from California. I only heard about your podcast a couple of months ago, and I've been listening to all of them in order. I just heard a podcast where you mentioned this email to tell you where we are while we're listening from May 2019. I'm sitting here working from home, obeying the shelter-in-place orders because of COVID-19. Being stuck at home allowed me a lot of time to get caught up on your podcast. Take care Trudy Winters. Thank you so much for your email, Trudy. It sounds amazing that you've started from the beginning. As far as I can see, it's around 125 episodes. Wow. You only have 30 left, so I better be quick to put out more. If you also like to drop me a line telling me where you are and what you're doing right now as you listen, please use this special email address, listener@theradiovagabond.com.
This is the Radio Vagabond podcast.
This is kind of where it starts to get weird. I went home for Christmas. My folks live in Tennessee. Everybody went to bed early one night, and I was kind of stir crazy. So I went down to this little Irish pub in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Only one other customer at the bar, and this is like 2 days before Christmas. There was a karaoke machine and a stage. So basically, we got drunk and sang karaoke songs to each other and the bartender, right? Like the only other two people in the bar. And we just kept switching. Been there.
So much to you. Understand me, sugar.
And it was like such a fun night. I don't know how much we drank. It was way too much type thing. And we just kept talking, having a good time. And he started to kind of talk about his job a little bit. But he was very slick about how he was wording it. But I had all this military experience, and I kind of knew what he was talking about. And he didn't know that I knew any of this. So he was kind of giving me enough rope, thinking I wouldn't know what to even say. And at the same time, I'm like, I know what he's saying. Should I tell him I know what he's saying? And then I got drunk enough and eventually said, hey, I got to tell you something. I have a full top secret clearance with polygraph with the FBI. I spent time in the Coast Guard. Do you have a job for me? Is exactly what I said. In the bar, hammered drunk.
Before you answer, let's start spreading the news.
I did. I said, do I have a job, or do you have a job for me? And he said, probably. And
That is so
we kept going. I exchanged my email. We exchanged emails before the night was out, went home, and the next day, hungover as heck, fixed up my resume, sent him an email and said, I hope you remember me. That was hilariously fun. Here's that resume I promised you. I don't know if you remember this part of the conversation. And I gave him the cliff notes. And, it was a week and a half later. I was interviewing with HR. It almost didn't even feel like I interviewed. It was kind of like a conversation. I'm sure that he was high enough up. I'm sure he said, I want this guy.
What kind of job was it?
So this was with a company called Sierra Nevada Corporation. They were in defense contracting. He was a program manager. Basically, Sierra Nevada Corporation owned the plane that kept all the spy stuff in it for a war. So imagery and radar and all the cool, crazy gadgets. They owned the plane. The other companies owned all the gadgets, would stick it in our plane. Another company owned the pilots. They would pilot the plane. And then there were people like me that would either fix the equipment or also fly on the missions and operate the equipment. So think of like what you think a drone would do. So like it's operating, people don't know it's there, it's looking at stuff, it's recording things. But if you have a bigger plane that fits humans in it, it can go higher and stay up longer than a little drone can do, and it has much better technology in it because a bigger plane can support heavier equipment, right? Mm-hmm. So we were just like a manned drone. So I got that job, and it sent me over to Afghanistan. So I was in Afghanistan for 3-month tours, and we would collect information on what was going on. So maybe there was a weapons cache or a high-value asset, or maybe it was just secure our own stations and such, protect the Marines that are doing their jobs, whatever it was. We were just out there to collect information.
Kind of spy stuff?
Kind of like spy stuff, yeah. I mean, we're looking at stuff, we're recording stuff. We're taking radar signatures and a whole bunch of crazy science stuff and a lot of computers. Yeah, we're collecting information, and that's going back to somewhere else where decisions are made. But it's kind of wild when you're on a base. You think it's all soldiers. There's plenty of soldiers, but there's plenty more contractors. The military infrastructure system builds out the fact that companies make things for war, and companies know how to use them, so you must hire companies to help you use them in war. So you have a base full of contractors and some soldiers. It's kind of interesting. Kind of has a town feel to it as well. You're in the middle of the desert Afghanistan, but you're eating food with other people that are working for other companies.
So was it kind of like Kuwait again?
Yeah, it had a Kuwait kind of feel to it for sure, but more serious. I mean, we were, so Kuwait, there wasn't really a war there. That was where the stuff came in and out for the war. Well, now we're in the war, in Afghanistan. So, there's attacks happening. There's Apache choppers and drones and fighter jets that are taking off. That sort of stuff didn't really exist in Kuwait.
No.
Yeah, now we have real stuff.
I'm living the good life, and nothing can get me down.
So there he was. He had it made at the age of 27, making $160,000 a year with 3 months of vacation every year. And then one day, it became really real.
One day in the evening, I'm not even on mission. I'm in the plane on the airway, operating the computers, just doing normal, basic, regular work.
Not in the air.
Yeah, we're not in the air. We're not on mission. I'm just in the plane. There's an air conditioner, literally tube in the plane to keep it cold, and I'm just operating the computer. And just this huge boom, just huge explosion happened, and I'm in the back of the plane. I lean out and I look through the cockpit window, and I just see the explosion, and it's you just instantly are like, holy crap, this is happening. You always know it can happen. Here it is, and I just jumped out of the plane. So we were getting...
How far away was it?
A football field away. So 100 yards, or maybe a football field and a half, something like that. Enough to be yo, this is real. Enough to feel the pressure of, inside, just kind of the... everything moves. It's all big slabs of concrete. The concrete moves, you feel the explosion, the plane judders, there's 2,000 pounds of fuel on that plane. And that's what I immediately thought of. I was like, I'm on something with 2,000 pounds of fuel, I better get the heck off this thing. So you just kind of jump out. And then when I jumped out, then I see everyone else is running, off the airfield. And now I'm just one of everybody else running off the airfield. So basically we were getting rocket attacked. The base that we were at is kind of like a mountain ridge that's a few miles away, and it's definitely close enough to be able to do something about it. If you could put a weapon there, you could get onto base, like a rocket or a mortar. And so that's what happened. We were getting attacked, that day. It's not the first time it happened, but it's the first time the alarms went off after they came in. They're kind of a little late when this happens. Kind of the first rocket sort of makes it, and then defenses kind of kick in. So it's not that I hadn't heard that we were getting attacked, but it's the first time that I saw an explosion, okay, it's actually real and right next to me. This is serious. Holy crap, I'm on this plane with all this fuel. I gotta get off this thing now. And then as soon as I jumped off and saw everyone else running, then it was just I don't know, you don't really think, you just sort of run. It's just kind of, oh my god, this is happening. Run. Because what you're running to is there's some defensive things on the outsides. It's kind of like an upside down U sort of tunnel made out of really thick concrete, and it's supposed to be able to withstand the attack. So every time they say, if the alarms hit, get underneath one of those, because you don't know where it's going to hit. You don't know where it's coming from, so you better be under something that can hold it, right? So you're just running. I do remember, I don't remember if it was during the run or after, definitely after, but you do start to think about the fact that these things are coming from a few miles away. There's a lot of wind and air that's happening. It's complete luck of the draw. Were they aiming for the plane that I was on? Or was that thing going somewhere else and just happened to get close to me? You sort of don't know. And then when you're running, you have to think it's just luck if you were to get hit or not at that point. I mean, they're not aiming. It's going in a tube. It's firing out of a tube just like anything, like a water balloon launcher, right? You don't know where it's going to hit. And that's when, that was the day. That's when it got real serious and real scary. For the next couple days, played it off and still did our job like anything. You kind of laugh these things off because you kind of get a little insane over there. If you were scared every time you get in a rocket attack, then, I don't know, it'd be a weird feeling. So you kind of laugh these things off and you just get back to work. But, then you go to bed and no one's around and you're sort of me personally, I was like, what the heck am I doing? I thought this was what I wanted. It was what I wanted, to get to let's see how far I can go with my security clearance job. let's see what we get to. And then 9 years later, here I am doing something super slick and cool and making good money, and not a lot of people are doing it. And then I'm almost dying, and I'm like, I don't even want to be here. I don't want to kill any of these people.
That's something that that gives you PTSD, and something where there's somebody to talk to you, because you were in this with a lot of other guys who were in the same.
There probably is. I didn't reach out. I just kept to myself. I guess got very negative. It was like I was overdoing the job now. I didn't want to do it anymore. But you don't just quit. You kind of can't quit the war, right? You can't quit your job and like fly home the next day.
But wait, it wasn't your war,
right?
And,
yeah.
And you told me that you didn't even believe in.
Yeah. It was like, I don't want to kill these people. A lot of the people that you see and interact with are just people just living out their lives. Yeah. There's bad guys and good guys, but in between the good guys and the bad guys, depending on what side you're on, one's good and one's bad. There's a whole bunch of people that just want to live their lives and their families and such. Two people that are fighting against each other, and there's just all this unnecessary but uncontrollable like collateral damage. But this collateral damage is people's lives and families. It's like a weird. I'm over there, and I'm like, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like I'm like pro America. I'm like, yeah, for sure. You know, I didn't join the military without that feeling of like patriotism. You know, 9/11 happened. I remembered where I was. You know, like I was going in with a reason, and then. But then once you kind of get in and realize that not everyone's bad, the country you're in that's supposed to be filled with all these people that want to kill you, you haven't met any of them, and everyone that you've met seems to not mind that you're there, actually sometimes supports that you're there because you're helping keep their little family safe. Mm-hmm. And you start to realize that all these people that I'm supposed to look at and say they are the enemy, I haven't found one that stood next to me that I could say that is the enemy. Everyone that stood next to me seems to be pretty good.
If only everything was black and white, it would be so easy.
It's just frustrating. In your mid-20s and you did a job and you worked hard to get here and everyone's proud and thinks you live in life, and then you don't want to do it anymore and you don't even want to be in the war that you're in. And like, what do? You know? And that's when I knew I needed to do something else. As a hobby at that point in time, when I was off work, I was like, getting on Udemy, and I was watching iPhone app development courses. I was just like I was just a geek. I was just into making apps for some reason. It was just like a time waster, but it was fun. So during this time that this was happening, I got very negative and very depressed and was just complaining about my job. And there was this girl, Tiffany, that I worked with, and one night we're smoking a cigarette and we're just talking, and I'm complaining still, and I'm very negative, and she just called me out. She said the one thing I needed to hear when I needed to hear it. And she said, Wade, all you do is complain about your job all day long. I don't get it. You realize that you make more than most of the people that are here. What the heck do you want to do? And like she said it like not motivating. She was like upset. Yeah. Like she was like, you're like
stop whining.
Yeah, and I don't think she hated her job either. Like, and now I'm complaining about my job, which is basically her job. And she's like, what the heck do you want to do? And I just like said it like without thinking. For like the first time in my life, I actually said what I wanted to do, not without worrying about anyone's pride or proud or achievement. I was just like, I'll tell you what I want to do. I want to build iPhone apps, and I want someone to pay me for it. And luckily it was Tiffany that asked me that, because Tiffany's story was that she was in the Army. She joined the Army because she was an art major. She went to Sweden for, I think, 2 months for like a media boot camp kind of thing. She joined the Army to pay off her debt. And but she knew about boot camps. She knew about other types of education. In my head, building iPhone apps meant a 4-year computer science degree. I'm 27. I'm still paying off student loan that I was just basically threw away. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to go back to school. And then her next thing is like, well, do they have any boot camps for that? And I said, well, I don't know. And so like finished cigarette, flicked it, right, and walked inside and got on the computer and just Googled iPhone boot camp. And lo and behold, there's like 10 companies that all provide this thing, couple months of training, spend some money up front and go. I just didn't even know like what to Google. I didn't even know what to ask. In my head, it was just unattainable. And so I didn't sleep that night. I Googled every company and read every review and everything I could on it. And the next day I applied for one. And while I was in Afghanistan, I interviewed in the middle of the night there with the CEO of one of the companies, because apparently my email was just so interesting. He had to interview me himself. And by the end of the interview, he said, said, look, we normally go and we vote people in based on culture and do they fit will they succeed? He said, you're in. I'm just going to let them know you're good. When can you start? And I said, well, I'm not going to burn a bridge. My contract ends in a couple months, so let's do it then. And then that was it. And then at that point, work didn't suck so much because then I knew I was leaving in a couple months with this other thing.
And now we finally get to the point in the story where Wade is getting close to becoming a digital nomad. And the reason he's on this podcast in the first place, that's in a few seconds. First, I'd like to tell you about another podcast I co-host and produce. It's the official podcast for TBEX, the global gathering for travel content creators.
Welcome to Travel Matters, the official podcast of TBEX.
We just published the first of 2 episodes that we call TBEX Survivors. Here we talk to people who actually went to Sicily in Italy to attend TBEX Europe that was postponed because of the coronavirus outbreak. And they were told to get out of the country as soon as they could. In the first episode, we talked to Kim Casanelli, who runs Next Bite of Life, Penny Sabulu and Simon Locke from Six Legs Will Travel, and YouTuber Jason Rupp, who not only went to Italy, before that he was in Wuhan, China, and right now he's in isolation in New York. It's really fascinating what they tell us. Just search for Travel Matters wherever you get your podcasts, or use the links that I put in the show notes. And we're back with Wade. He was about to go on a boot camp to become an app developer.
I went into it with everything that I got from the military, which was, it was a 3-month or 2-month program. I spent 10 grand up front, and I just went in going, look, you can always go back to this thing if you need it, but you paid off 2 months of rent in Chicago. You're here, give it everything you have and just find out. You'll either find out that you love it or you hate it, but don't get an answer to one of those. Don't be like, yeah, kind of, sort of. And in my head, that meant just give it everything you have, because if you give it everything, you're either, it's just going to feel like a chore or it's going to feel like a gift. And that's what I did. So for this is where people go, only 2 months, and I go, yeah, it's 2 months time frame, but I spent 16 to 18 hours a day, 7 days a week working, for 2 months straight. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, harder than any military thing, harder than any training I ever did, was going to school for 2 months to learn how to build iPhone apps.
But it was your passion.
But it was it. I was playing. I was having fun. Yeah. And I was in a room with 14 other people that were having fun and teachers that were enjoying teaching it. And it was tough and concepts were tricky and we stumbled over things together. And I can't tell you how many times I walked around like the 5 city blocks that were surrounding the school, just like, I don't know, working things out in my head and then coming back into the room and getting back on my computer and going again.
Was it in the cards that you would end up doing that nomadically, or did you think that you would end up in some big office space in the Silicon Valley? Or
yeah, my goal when I went in was like, I'm going to work for Facebook. I want to work for one of the big ones, and that was a goal for a while. I got out of boot camp and moved to Denver, Colorado, because out of interest, I just wanted to. I went to an iPhone app development.
Nice place.
Yeah, great place. I was there for 4 years. I loved it. I went there a week and a half into moving there. I went to an iPhone app developer meetup just to meet my people again, right? And 2 people came in and basically said, we're looking for a developer. We want to put an app in a cannabis grow house because there's no apps there. We don't know what that app would be, but we want to stick one there anyways. And then I said, hi, my name's Wade. I've learned how to code for 2 months. Here's my capstone app I built, which was kind of like an Uber for going skiing in the Rockies kind of idea. And I said, this sounds cool. I was like, I'm pro cannabis. I like that it's a medicine. I like that I like what's going on here. I was like, I'd give a stab at this. And I said, I don't know what it would be either. I said, can you put me into grow houses? So we did. I took a few tours and I just kept noticing that they kept writing information down on a clipboard, moving the plants from room to room. And eventually I just asked, what do you do with the clipboard? And they said, such and such comes in at the end of the night, punches it on a spreadsheet, then the manager comes in and emails it to the state every day. And I go, wait. So you write it down, this guy types it up, and then the boss emails it. And they go, yeah. I go, oh, all right, well, this is easy. I'm just going to build you like a scanner or something, because all of the plants had barcodes on them. but they weren't using the barcodes. They were just writing down the barcode numbers.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I was like, there's a barcode. It's right there. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just cut some steps out, and I don't know, this will be like an inventory thing. So I pitched this to those guys that were looking to put an app in, and I pitched it to them with like a spreadsheet and an app that didn't work except if you hit one button and it would show what I needed it to show on the screen, but nothing functioned. I said, this is what I think. I think it could be this. And they said, this is cooler than we actually thought. This is like a real app. And they said, we can't pay you for 4 months. You know, you're going to build the thing that we're going to pitch and get money for. Are you still in? I said, yeah. Luckily with the military stuff, I had some money saved. So I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. And just like I said that the boot camp was the hardest thing I did, the next 4 months, really 5 months of my life were the first time that I took like a job. Even with the military, I went through the motions. I did the job. I played the game right. But it's not extremely exhausting. It's not hard, because I didn't know hard until I built this app. 5 months of Googling everything, like, because they were like, this is cool, can you do this? And I was like, well, no, but like, I'll Google it, like, we'll figure it out. And for 5 months, I Googled everything. And again, 14, 16-hour days. The boot camp kind of warmed me up for doing long hours on the computer. And, we did it. We eventually got to a point where we were ready to pitch it. I pitched it as a 2-month boot camp graduate, and then 4 months of Googling stuff. I pitched to venture, VCs that came in to talk to us, and apparently I did a good enough job because we scored $500,000 in investment seed round and started hiring people, and it's a $3.5 million company now. It actually worked. It actually moved on and worked. Since I've been doing this, I've had a number of different iPhone app development jobs. I've worked for GoPro on a video editing app called Splice. I helped build spy apps for cops in Florida to stop human trafficking and crimes against children, so kind of old life mixed with new life. And while I've been doing this, I have actually been volunteering for the same school that I went to learn. And then they, over time, saw that I was, into the program and offered me a paid position to mentor high school teachers for their program. And I've been doing that now for about 5 years, and now I own that program. So we have over 100 schools, and I'm kind of the direct line of contact for creating and updating curriculum, talking to the teachers and making sure they never get stuck too far, helping their students out. We put on competitions for the students and just propel iPhone app development into high school classrooms. That's my main gig now. It started as a volunteer at the boot camp, and now I run it. And then I just have some other side contracts with other things just because I have the subject matter expert kind of knowledge. Then I bill for that contractually. I do it all remotely. And, life is good.
Yeah. So what do you think? Wasn't that an interesting story? And he's only 34. In a minute, I have one more question for Wade. What's in the future for him? First, let me remind you that this episode was partly supported by Hotels25.com. When we are all able to travel again after the corona pandemic, this is a tool you might want to use. It's something I use all the time. It helps me find the best deals on hotel rooms, guest houses, apartments, and hostels, no matter where I'm going. You see, the same exact room can be more expensive on one search site than the other. I could make searches on 15 different sites, but why would I when Hotels25.com does that for me? It searches the top travel sites in one simple search. If you also like saving time, make a note of it and use it when we're all able to move out of our homes and go out and explore the world. Hotels25.com.
We talked about that you get stir crazy and can't look 20 years into the future, so Wade, do you see yourself doing this for the next 20 years?
No. I don't. I'm already on my next venture. I'm already making moves. So basically, I have fallen in love with journalism and storytelling and video creation and blog writing. I know all this stuff about apps, and I've struggled with this for a while, that I'm like, I want to do something of my own brand with apps. And the problem was I would code all day long, and then when it was time to turn on my thing, I was burnt out from coding, because everyone said, well, just make an online course or do a YouTube channel about coding. And I'm like, yeah, but after I'm done working, I don't want to talk about work. I want to talk about something else. So I've kind of hit the realization I love apps. Like, I shop for apps like people shop for clothes. I love hearing the stories behind them. I love getting into like the user experiences and the psychologies, and I like talking to people that build them and try to figure out why or how they almost failed, all that stuff. So I started small. I've created a weekly newsletter called Apps Weekly, appsweekly.com if you're there.
Or put a link in the show notes.
Thank you. Basically, I'm always goofing off. I'm always trying new apps. I'm always researching stories. And I've just been doing this for years, just for fun. It's my thing. I geek out on it. And I was just kind of like, why don't I just stick this in a newsletter to start out with? It's nothing overbearing. I don't want to burn myself out. Let's start that. So it's been going for a month now. It's been so fun and exciting. The feedback's been awesome. People are like, I never really get this news anywhere else. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I'll be that source for you then. And, so I'm going to create a YouTube channel for video content, a podcast for podcast content, and that'll kind of just be shells, and it'll all feed into things I put in the newsletter. My goal is just to be a mobile app journalist. Yeah, that's kind of my goal.
But I guess like any good startup, if you do it because it's something you'd like to have yourself.
I do it because it's cool that it's my own thing, talking about my own passion. It's finding other people that are into it too. It's kind of cool to geek out about your thing and sort of let the audience enjoy it and come to you. I've always hopped into other people's communities, which is cool, but it's kind of cool that they're coming to me and they're interested in the app stuff. People that even just say I use them, but I don't really appreciate them like you do. I don't really geek out about them like you do. I put some stories into the newsletter and they've replied and said, well, this is cool, or oh my god, I can totally use this. And it's like, okay, that's awesome. That's the whole point.
Since I spoke to Wade that day in Canggu, Bali, his blog, appswithwade.com, is live. There's a link to both that and his newsletter, appsweekly.com, in the show notes. Another regular travel episode about my adventures in South Africa is coming up very soon. Produced by radioguru.co.uk. My name is Palabo. See ya.